apparently he is. So thank you for coming in to this green room. Sorry for the mistake before. I put in a different link, and so there was a couple of different problems there, but I think I have sorted this out. So if you have a question, raise your hand, do the requests, and I will get to them as I can. Feel free to ask about anything. I obviously will talk about pretty much anything. You can talk to me about the time I did Puff Daddy, P. Diddy's album cover, or whatever he was named at that particular time. But no one's come across yet. This morning I've been talking to a couple of cricket podcasters from New Zealand. We've been talking a lot about Kyle Jamieson and Tim Southey and these sorts of people. So if you have a question, just put it up. I'm still learning about the whole green room thing. So I'm trying to organize the page as we go. But yeah, no, I was talking about Kyle Jamieson today. I just find him, a really, really fascinating bowler, the way he goes about things. I wrote a piece for ESPN about that, about how we really haven't had a combination kind of player who has had the ability to swing the ball at that high, at that pace. Generally, tall bowlers, they float the ball up a little bit, so you can drive them quite easily, but that's quite hard to do with with Jamieson, because he's a little bit quicker and he swings the ball a little bit more. And in other ways, I suppose you've got he's got the extra bounce. He's obviously bowling from 30 centimeters higher than other players. It's a really, really fascinating cricketer, I think. And I know a lot of people are saying things along the lines of, wow, it's, Jamieson, he's got a bowling average of 14, but he hasn't played in Asia yet. So, no, but there's a lot of blokes in the world who played 8 tests in their careers who don't have a bowling average of 14, no matter where they have played. So I think that there's certainly a long way to go there as far as his overall averages. No one's expecting him to average 14 by the end of his career. But to do that over your first 8 tests is an incredible, incredible package, I think, is maybe the best way of putting him. So if you do have a question, just raise your hand digitally. Don't do it in your lounge room or your office, wherever you are right now. But if you do have one, if you're feeling shy and you want to add something to the discussion, I'll be going over there. But the idea of this is record this so that we can put some of these chats up on YouTube eventually. So this is a kind of a trial run for me. So if you do have a question, put it in the requests. In fact, just now. Oh, here we go. Vamsy, you're on mute. How you doing?
Hey, Jarrod.
You good?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about the upcoming India-Sri Lanka series. Like, what do you think it's going to be close at all, especially after they've lost to England, like all of their matches? So,
No, it's a really good question. I mean, Arjuna Ranatunga is obviously very, very upset with everything that's going on there. For that, a full-strength India team came across, but that's not quite the world we live in anymore, is it? I'm not sure, and I've said this a lot, I'm not sure how often full-strength teams will really travel going forward. You'll get little bits of them, obviously, coming into major tournaments and these sorts of things. But as a general rule, I can certainly see why. That would not be the case. So I think, having seen how Sri Lanka has just played, I think they would struggle against a second 11 from India right at the moment, especially when we're talking about white ball cricket. I'm going to do a hell of a name drop on you here. I remember talking to Rahul Dravid a couple of years ago when I was at the Beckenham ground watching India A. So there was only about 4 people there, so he had to talk to me. And he was saying that he couldn't actually believe the levels of talent when it came to the Indian white ball team. The players that were coming through. He said red ball cricket, he wasn't quite at the same level. He didn't think that was quite as strong, although, he certainly didn't think that they were a weak team. But when it came to it, the white ball talent that the Indians were preparing and bringing through the system, he just could not have said enough about. So I think, based on what we saw them do against Australia, even in the red ball game, and having a look at Sri Lanka. I mean, Sri Lanka at the moment, I've been thinking about this a lot. I think I'm going to get some of this wrong. Bangladesh is the only one I can't really decide on. But most of the other teams in the world, in New Zealand, well, sorry, I'll leave New Zealand out, but Australia, England, Ireland, South Africa, um, Pakistan are all bowling teams. West Indies, all bowling teams, right? Whether it be their white ball cricket or even the red ball cricket, they're very very bowler dependent. Sri Lanka, when I was thinking about them, I couldn't actually tell you what their strength was. Like I couldn't, if you were to sit me down right now and say that what are the Sri Lankan cricket good at the moment, I'm just not sure I have a real good answer for you. So I don't think they are going to be pulverized by what are we calling them? India A, India Light, India No Calories. I'm not sure what we would call them. But I really, I struggle to see how Sri Lanka at the moment with the team that they have can make a consistent results. And I think that the Indian side can. I will say this though, I still think that there's a lot of talent out there when it comes to Sri Lankan cricket. I really think a lot of this is about processes, is about getting people to the right positions and everything. But it could be a really fascinating series to see how the young Sri Lankans go. The unfavored Sri Lankans go up against the sort of the golden children of Indian cricket. But thanks so much for your question, and I will go to who's here? Aditya, how are you?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. What's your question?
I was just reading Andrew Fiddle Fernando's article yesterday on the state of Sri Lankan cricket. Like it was a short article on what are the challenges. The reason that he states was that there is no domestic structure that is actually present, proper domestic structure that is actually present. And also the board is elected in ways which are quite questionable as well. How do you think this will, like, there are some interesting talents in Sri Lankan cricket who might not get the right um, playgrounds, so to speak. How do you think they will progress from here?
Look, essentially, up until very, very recently, I think in international cricket, you could, what's the best way of putting it? I think in international cricket, you could win based on your talent alone, right? So if you had a few very talented players, I think it was very, very possible for you to be able to win a bunch of matches. I don't think that's where we're going. I think that you might win a couple going ahead, but if you want to win consistently now, you need incredible processes behind these things. You need planning well in advance. There's too much cricket, too much international cricket, and it overlaps and it doesn't always make sense. So you need someone completely on top of that to make sure that the right players are going to be available at the right time. You need backups. So you need role definition, and a lot of these teams they just don't have standard role definition as well. And so if your bowling is dependent on a particular kind of bowling being your best third or fourth bowler, you need to know who the second guy is, the third guy is. Have a proper depth chart when it comes to those sorts of things. And it goes further and further, I think, all the way through your cricket. Coaching, academy setups, infrastructure, diets, analysis, planning, all these sorts of things come together. And I think that is where Sri Lanka is being let down. You could easily argue with me, and I wouldn't particularly argue that they're in a weaker playing era than they were in, say, 2013, 2014, when they won the World Cup, they beat England in England. I wouldn't disagree that they're in a weaker playing era, but it's all the other disadvantages that other teams just don't have. We've just seen New Zealand, they got all their planning right as much as possible. And you're still going to make mistakes. We saw, with selection, New Zealand certainly didn't have a perfect selection as they were going around the World TC. But they got so many things right on the way there. And at the moment, Sri Lanka is getting so many things wrong. And it wasn't that long ago that Pakistan was doing a very, very similar thing. You could argue that South Africa is doing a similar thing at the moment. I mean, look at the joy that South African players won from winning that series. That's because I think they feel that they have just been left on their own a little bit by Cricket South Africa. And it's very hard to compete consistently with that case. That's where I think the problems with Sri Lankan cricket are going to come up. It's that competing consistently. And I think that's what we have seen over and over again of recent times. I really do believe there's still a lot of talented players in the Sri Lankan setup. And to prove that in a different way, if you actually look at the West Indies setup, it was only a couple of years ago we were all looking at it going, this is terrible. Like how are they ever going to do, how are they ever going to play cricket well ever again? And they have changed. And I don't just mean the World T20 Championships, which has largely changed outside of them. But I mean, literally, West Indies cricket is much better as a test match playing nation now. And they're playing a lot better cricket. So yeah, these things can change quite quickly, I suppose, is what I'm saying. But you do have to put the work in. And at the moment, I have not seen that from, I've certainly not seen that from Sri Lankan cricket. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, sorry. It shows mute in the green
It
room,
does
so
show
I'm
me.
not
You're right.
sure.
No, I
Yeah.
can.
So I just had a follow-up question.
Sure.
These you're talking about the depth charts and all of that. So
hmm
for that, there needs to be a kind of at least what do we say? Some representation of these people in outside leagues as well, right? Like some people can go and play in the CPL, and some people can go and play in the BBL. I don't see a lot of Sri Lankans actually going out or being picked. I'm not sure about the stats, but I did not see any notable names there.
No, it's very good. And just a reminder, just before I answer that, if you do have a question, you can put up a request to speak, and you can also chat in the discussion. But no, you're completely right. It's what's a really interesting way of putting it. So essentially, they have fallen off the map. Like Sri Lankan
Yeah.
cricket has fallen off the map. So when I was in St. Lucia in 2018, I remember talking to Mohammed Khan, who was the general manager, and I was just like, you could actually put together a really good team now by just getting a bunch of really cheap Sri Lankan players that are,
Hmm.
obviously Dasan Shanaka, Udana at that stage hadn't sort of been reborn. Kusal
Hmm.
Mendes, that was before these innings, and we were going through them, going, these are quality players. We've seen these guys play. They can play good cricket. And I think what seemed to happen not long after that was that they didn't get a go. And it's partly because they haven't got a go, is because they don't have a good local league. So there's no way of knowing if these guys are any good or not. There's no
Hmm.
system to be able to pick them from, and it's been a huge problem with Sri Lankan cricket. And yeah, I remember talking to someone who got a job with Sri Lankan cricket not that long ago, and I said, honestly, I think you could do really well in Sri Lankan cricket by just letting these guys play in other leagues, getting them out there, pushing them out there. And to be fair,
Hmm.
I think Sri Lankan cricket has worked that out as well. But great questions, and thank you very much. All right,
Thank you so much.
Steve coming through. Steve, you are on the stream. Oh, Steve, you there? I think you might have yourself on mute, Steve. Oh, Kelvin. While Steve works out his mute, what have you got for me, Kelvin?
Well, I'm from Bloomer.
Sorry?
I'm from Bloomer.
Yeah, what's your question?
Well, what you guys do for a living?
Oh, okay. We're talking about cricket here, man, but thank you so much for chatting. Oh, that was fun. What do I do for a living? I don't even know how to explain that, actually, if we're being really, really honest. Steve, you're there if you wanted to chat, but if anyone else has any other questions, I'll just see if anyone else is there asking some questions other than poor Kelvin, who's about to be bored absolutely out of his brain when it comes to cricket chat. It may already be bored out of his tone. Steve, you there?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. What's your
Hello.
question?
So I wanted to know how scouting in IPL works, like local scouting and overseas scouting.
Yeah, local scouting, I'll be honest, Steve, I've not had much to do with it. The last person I talked to about it was actually I talked to John Wright and I talked to Darren Berry about it at one stage. Um, it seems a little bit amateur for a major league at the moment, but that's also because, if you think about scouting for an American sporting league, right? I think in an American sporting league, you have the situation where there's already a structure to scout from. And a lot of when the American sporting leagues had to scout internationally, especially from Europe, they struggled quite a bit. And even from Central America with the baseball, I think they struggled a little bit more at the start just because there wasn't a structure there. And I think that's been a little bit of the case. I remember, I can't talk about the IPL, but I remember when I was with the Big Bash, and it was very, very basic, the scouting outside of all the play. Like there was a bunch of plays that everyone knew about, right? That were really widely known, but the scouting at that level, sort of separate to that or sideways to that, wasn't as strong. And I think that's probably still the case in the IPL. I think that the scouting structures, I think there's a lot of very good scouts, but I think the scouting structures are probably where we fall down. I think you need you can't just send someone out with a laptop and a camera. You really need them to go out with to understand what they're looking for, what you're trying to replace, what sort of skill sets you're looking for. There needs to be a regional based thing. And realistically, in a country like India, you could have 25, 30 scouts. And you could be going out there, you could be running regular camps. And I don't think we're quite there. One thing I wanted to do at St. Lucia, had I stayed at St. Lucia when I was the general manager there, is I really just wanted to run talent identification camps, from kids that are 15, 17, 19, 20, but also, 25 and 30-year-olds. There's a really, really interesting thing when it comes to scouting from a couple of years back, where the Victorian cricket team had a bunch of really good seam bowlers, but they were all sort of fast medium or medium fast guys. So they had guys like Damien Fleming and Paul Rifle, and these sorts of bowlers all coming through, but they didn't have anyone particularly fast. They just went out to club cricket and just said, if you've got a story of anyone who bowls particularly fast, we would like to have them. And Mick Lewis was picked up from that, and Shane Harwood was picked up from that. They both ended up playing for Australia. Now, Australian cricket at that stage would have said it was pretty good at identifying talent. And yet you had two guys who played for Australia who were basically both 30 when they entered first-class cricket. And they were both picked up just because of one particular talent drive. I really think right across the cricket world, we just don't go out and check things as much as we should. And, perhaps there hasn't been the, what would you say, the financial windfalls that you would need to do to be able to do that. But basically, I think that we're a little bit far behind with scouting just because it hasn't been I always look at the IPL and the franchise leagues and the national leagues as basically capitalist systems versus government systems. And in government systems, you just kind of hope really talented people turn up on your doorstep and want to work for you. And in a more capitalist environment, you have to go out and get them because you're fighting with other people. And I think that's where we've been with cricket scouting. So it's a little bit more backward than it probably needs to be at the moment. But there's no reason why that can't be fixed and can't be updated.
Thank you.
No worries. I don't see any other questions. Let me just see if anyone's added anything to the discussion. Although I have heard that, hilariously, it doesn't put all them up. Oh, we've got someone come through here. Satish, how are you? You're on the air.
Yeah, hello, am I audible?
You're very audible.
So the question that I have, Jarrod, is that we are now seeing India having two teams. One is playing Test and another one is playing T20 in Sri Lanka, ODI T20. So is it ever going to be possible that we'll see teams like India, England and Australia forming two teams that will play two different formats of the game?
Well, we are. I mean, that's what you've just described it, haven't you? I mean, we've had it before. In 1930, England played two tests at the same time in West Indies and New Zealand. Australia recently played Sri Lanka on one day in a T20, didn't they? And the next day they played India in a test match. It is going to happen more and more, especially, I think, as there is my guess, this is just my guess, there will be a devaluation of international white ball cricket outside of major events. And I think that we'll see a lot more, what I suppose they would say in football, are friendlies. And there'll be a lot more preparation. And you'll also be trying to bring players through, give them maybe a slightly easier run early on in their careers. And so I do think that we will see that a lot more. But, I mean, fundamentally, Sudesh, there's too much cricket being played, isn't there? There's too much international cricket being played. There's too much franchise cricket being played. And how do you fit it all in? So you are going to see these situations. I think they'll happen more and more. But perhaps there'll be, there might be a reckoning in the future where we have to look at this a bit more clear and say, is this the right way of doing these things?
Yeah, I have another one. Can I ask?
Of course. Just before you go ahead, if you do have a question, obviously just send a request through or put it on the discussion. But Satish, the floor is yours.
The question I want to ask is that we saw in World Test Championship final that, and mostly in England, that ball swings in all 5 days. So why people can't accept the same thing about spinning tracks, that if ball spins from day one, then people start complaining about that.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation about spinning pitches compared to other things is very, very clear. But one thing I would say is they're not the same, spin and swing, because what you're talking about is a couple of tests where the ball has swung the whole time. That is not the case. That is not the normal situation of swing bowling in general. And also, that's not the pitch, Satosh. That's the air. At a certain point, yes, the grass covering helps, but England has lush grass. It's going to swing more often in England than anywhere else. The spin bowling thing is also generally that it doesn't get easier. It starts to swing quite a lot in England, and then it never really, it starts to swing a lot in England, but there can be periods where it doesn't swing. There can be certain balls that don't swing. Once the ball starts to spin in Asia, it usually just spins more and more and more, doesn't it? Or it usually grips more, and usually it controls the game more. So it is different. But as a general rule, yeah, the way we talk about spinning pitches is completely wrong. I think that spinning pitches can quite often be one-dimensional, which is a problem for them as a general rule. You can have a pitch that has swing bowling and spin. That's not always the case if you have a ragging turner and those sorts of things. So I think there's a lot of different parts of it. But yeah, there is a basic bias towards that, and that's because England and Australia wrote about the game and talked about the game more than anyone else, and they're the ones who are most listened to. I've written an article about it during the India-England series, but there are key differences that are also worth talking about. England can do a lot of different things to their pitches, and they can do many, many different things, but essentially the ball is going to swing more in England than in other places. That's just a fundamental part of that. And that has nothing to do with the pitches at the end of the day. The ball swings in the air. So it is a completely different thing. But thanks so much for your question. I'll just remove you. And we've got Ed. Hello, Ed.
Oh, hi, Jarrod. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad.
I just wanted to ask, obviously you talked about kind of scouting in the kind of T20 franchise leagues, and I kind of do a bit of coverage of the NFL, and you see when the franchise is there, they'll have about 20 people on their scouting teams. Like 10 people will do people currently in the NFL, and 10 will do scouting of players coming out of college. We've got a scene with the 100 this year. There's obviously the coach in charge, a couple of teams of analysts, and maybe a couple of coaches, but there seems to be kind of a lack of information going around, which sees the likes of Dan Moriarty of Surrey's had a really good start to his T20 career kind of not get picked. Do you think there's a huge advantage to be gained by, a specific IPL or 100 team actually putting 5, 10 people in charge of actual talent identification rather than just maybe having 1 or 2 people and the coaches kind of going off what they see?
Yeah, one of the biggest problems is the coaches. So coaches, it's funny in cricket, we never really had coaches for like 100 years. Then when we got them, they sort of completely took over the way that things have been done. Generally, you talk about NFL teams, coaches don't usually make the decisions there. The general manager makes the decision. Can't get the word decision out at the moment. But that's because the general manager is spending all their time looking at scouting. And so what the coach will generally say, and this is the way that I would certainly like it to work more. The coach says, these are the kind of players that we want to fit our game plan. Can you go and find these players? And these are the kind of roles that we're trying to get into. And then you come back to the coach with a couple of different options, and the coach certainly has a say. Too often in cricket at the moment, the coach is saying everything because they're the one going from league to league to league, and you don't have anyone who is specifically doing that. IPL is slightly different, but the 100, and I can say this because I talked to teams about getting a job with the 100. My memory of the 100 is that every team has a local analyst and a overseas analyst. I think that's true, although there's certainly 2 analysts for every team. Some of those analysts are very good at going and finding this talent, but they're still not scouts. So you have an analyst, and you have usually a captain or a major player having a say, and you have a coach playing a say. That is completely different than having a scouting network. The sort of scouting network that you're talking about. So yes, I think that there's absolutely no doubt there's incredible things that we could do with that. One thing I would say is that sure, people like you and I would, and who was it before? Aditya, I think. No, I forget who asked before about this as well. There's obviously a lot that can be done, but we have to remember that this is a really, really immature market at the moment, and we're still coming to grips with it. I remember writing a report on how we could fix St. Lucia and showing it to a friend, and he's like, "Look, this is great. Everything you put here is really good." He goes, "But isn't this all basic?" And I was like, "Yeah, and cricket doesn't do most of this stuff." So I think that's where we are at the moment. But yeah, you're right. I think a proper, thorough scouting network. So England is the first international team that I'm aware of that has scouts. So before that, we had selectors, obviously coaches, captains. We've never had anyone whose job it is to go out and tell us who the best 3 wicket keepers are. A specific job like that. And then England started using wicket keeping scouts, didn't they? And then they had fast bowling scouts, and I'm assuming they have them for everyone now. And that's the sort of level that cricket will eventually get to, I think.
Yeah, I mean, do you think there's kind of a market inefficiency on the scouting level for, I don't know, teams like, say, Afghanistan, where a lot of the talent is just kind of nowhere to be seen a lot of the time? You get these incredibly talented players coming out of nowhere. When you have the kind of national selection committee they have that kind of go off names a lot of the time, it seems, do you think there's kind of a inefficiency there for a nation like Afghanistan, which has kind of not the same structure of other teams, where actually there could be players out there that could make an impact for them, but they don't really have people going out and finding them as much as they maybe.
I mean, cricket is rife with inefficiency from top to bottom, I think. No, I think you're right there. I think India is inefficient with its talent. It might still be the best team in the world, and you can make a very, very strong argument that they are missing out on a huge amount of talent in their country. And I think that is the case right across the board. I think when we were talking about that earlier. So, yeah, I remember when Iceland came through and did very well in football, my first thought was, if every smaller cricket country in the world isn't looking at what Iceland has done. Iceland basically has a system where they are coaching up everyone in what they think is Iceland style football, if you will. And then that means that the coaches are picking from players that they understand and they know. Perhaps it might have a problem with individual flair going forward, but everyone plays the same plan. Everyone understands it, and you know who all the most talented players are. I just don't think that's the case in most cricket nations for a variety of reasons. My guess is that there are tennis ball leagues in Birmingham and Leicester where there are incredible talents in English cricket, and they're not getting them, and that's a professional setup. We know that there are whole states of India where first-class cricketers aren't coming out. What are they? Are they not playing cricket? Are they not bred for cricket? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think it really is a case that there's a lot of inefficiencies. And I think that New Zealand you talk about Afghanistan, New Zealand might have kind of started to show the way a little bit here. I don't think that they were as good as maybe finding all those cricketers, but what they did was when they found their best cricketers, they kept them in the system and they upskilled them all. And I think that's the other thing that you have to be able to do. But yeah, cricket is absolutely rife with inefficiencies. I've been talking to some major teams over the last 2 or 3 months during the IPL. The sorts of things that they don't do, as far as I'm aware, like teams still don't have an opposition scout. So most major leagues in the world, you have a person whose job it is to go and watch the opposition play live to see things, and then obviously you take a lot of that stuff from the cameras and from the data as well. And I don't know of any international cricket team that does that regularly. They might do it for a couple of big series. I don't know if any of the IPL teams are doing it, although I'd like to think at least 1 or 2 of them are. It's an inefficient sport, and that's why we like it.
No, absolutely. Thank you for answering that. It's really interesting to hear, because I feel like one team in the IPL or the 100 could just put a general manager in place, send him over to the New England Patriots, learn a bit, come back, and then I know there might be 1 or 2 wins to earn just by doing the basics. So
no,
yeah,
beautiful. Thank you very much for your question. Look, teams have certainly done it. Australia has spent a lot of time with professionals in America. I think it's there. It's just the thinking in cricket hasn't quite been there, and it also hasn't been matched also by the finances. And I think we're probably getting to a stage now where that is happening. So, Steve, I will bring you up.
Yeah. So I read in one news report that's Malul and Rangarajan from RCB doing scouting by going in the selection matches of various state teams. So think that's quite an innovative way of scouting local players.
Yeah,
And
I think that's probably a bit more normal, but I think when you're scouting, I think really what you're trying to do is you want to find the players who are maybe even more removed from the system itself. So what generally happens is anyone who's sort of in any sort of underage team ends up in a system. What you want is a page on sort of every single player. So coming through, so there should be a proper scouting report of, okay, so Steve Boo is coming through and he bowls leg spin, but he doesn't have a wrong one. All right. And he gets most of his wickets by sliding the ball on. He can't really bat, but he is actually an excellent fielder. And these are the positions he fields. My guess is that there are 500 to 1,000 Indian players of a decent level at the moment. And I wonder how many people have a scouting report even as extensive as what I've just given you there. And that's a very basic one. You know, when we're talking about the NFL players, like I've seen some of the scouting reports used for American sports and also for Premier League football. It's a completely different level to the way that we scout. You know, I saw a cricket scouting report for someone in Australia, and it literally said all rounder can hit the ball pretty hard. It's like, what does that tell me? So there's a lot more that we can get to. That's what I mean before. I don't think the scouts are necessarily the problem, because I think there's some really good scouts in cricket at the moment. It's the system. What are they looking at? What are they looking for? What metrics are they marking these players on? What information are they trying to get from the players? You know, when I scouted players for St. Lucia, I contacted their families so I could sit down with them. You know, so it's a completely different world where we can go and where we will go, I think is fair to say. Just remember, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them up. Did you have anything else there, Steve?
yes. So there are these players like Scott Key and Scott Key from New Zealand, and there's Joe Clark from England, and you obviously know their shady backgrounds they come from. So, do you think international teams should give them a spot in their country team? Like,
yeah, no,
does it set a wrong precedent for, say, franchise teams? Let's say the best T20 league in the world employs these two regularly.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I'm just gonna take you off as speaker because there's something clicking just in the background of your call there. We have not kind of got to this point yet. I mean, it wasn't that. If you look at some of the recent presidents of the MCC, you know, we're still certainly being involved with people from the Rebel Cricket days. Cricket is cricket is probably not quite at the point. I mean, it really hasn't dealt with Me Too that much. There's been some horrific cases of women being assaulted and mistreated in Pakistan and Sri Lankan cricket. And those are just two that I know off the top of my head. I'm sure it's been a problem in other countries as well. As far as the players that you're talking about, again, you could add Alex Hales into that as well. You know, there are certainly players. We just haven't got to the point of completely dealing with that. I think we need to be more open and honest, and we need to talk about it a little bit more. I think it needs to be at the forefront when we're talking about players. You know, there's no point just being offended when we find someone's tweet from 8 years ago. We need to talk about the root causes of this, and it has to be brought up when we're talking about players and we're talking about this. So for instance, you know, we just had in the NBA 2 NBA coaches, and their past history has been brought up. I think that's the step forward. That's where it starts, and then we start to get into bigger questions. I think with you called him Scott K. I'll call him Scott K because I can never remember how to pronounce his name. The stories from that trial and everything he was involved in are horrendous, like absolutely horrendous. And I don't think, even though I think he was found not guilty of the overall crimes, but when you hear when you heard the stories and the testimony and everything else, I think if you are picking a franchise team, I think it's worth you putting that in perspective of who he is, of how that goes. And I think going forward that, you know, we should all be judged a bit more on everything that we have done. And I think too much that has not been the case. But now I think with the internet, things don't really go away in the same way. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting question. And whether, the other thing that you said, which is really interesting, is, should we be picking those players? I think that there has to be, at a certain point, there has to be the option of players to get better and to have redemption. You're guilty of something for a short period of time, and you shouldn't be guilty forever. But I also want to look at, and I'll take this slightly on a different tangent, the Selbit Butt. I do have to do that. Sorry, something's just come up on my phone to remind me for later. The Selman Butt situation there, you have a situation with Selman Butt where he obviously wants to play, he wants to be involved and be a match referee. And I fundamentally can understand how someone has been involved in match fixing could have a complete redemption, be completely honest about everything they've done, and actually have a lot to give the game of cricket, especially around match fixing. I'm not sure that Selman Butt should ever be a match referee, because then he'd be in charge of a game. But I can certainly see why he could help younger players, and especially help players as they're coming through, so they understand what not to do. The problem is, and you could say this with Scott K. I don't know the Joe Clark one as well. I don't know what he said afterwards. But the problem is that Selman Butt hasn't really apologized for what he's done. He hasn't, more importantly, come clean about everything he's done. He was caught doing this much. And we know that that's not the case. We know that the ICC were looking into him for a lot longer than Sun were looking into him. And so you then have a situation of, there's a thing about forgiving the people for what they've done, but if they are not actually willing to be open and honest, if they are still, in some cases, victim blaming, if they are still looking at this in another way and not completely coming forward, why should we forgive them? And why should we bring them back into our game? I think most important that we're having these conversations. I think for a long time, people, the MCC can basically make anyone their chairman, and it might get a line in an article that they once went on a rebel tour. I don't think that's good enough. This is supposed to be a game for everyone. And too many people have gotten away with too many things, I think, before. And I think we should really be, I think part of it is just discussing it and talking about these things and bringing them out. And I know it's a really, really small point, but, Dinesh Karthik making that sort of stupid joke on air and then apologizing for it properly and saying, I made a mistake. That was wrong. I'm not apologized if you're offended. I'm apologizing because what I did was wrong. That's probably the society that we're trying to build, hopefully everywhere, and within cricket going forward. And I think that's where things can get better. But excellent question there. I don't see anyone else with a question lined up at the moment. So if anyone wants to put their hand up and come through, I have heard from my producer that there is a problem with the way that it picks up people from Android devices sometimes. If you are on an Android device and you're sitting there going, I've raised my hand for 100 questions and they haven't come through, I do apologize. But not all I can't even see all the listeners on my phone. I think that's a Spotify Greenroom thing. But really what we're trying to do here is create a situation where you guys can ask live questions, and when we can record them and we can put them up onto YouTube directly, so we can have your smiling, I was going to say smiling faces, but in one case, I think that's a coffee that I'm looking at. And in another case, it's not a smiling face. So that's the idea. That's what we're really doing here, is really a trial to see if that works. Because on YouTube, I can chat to people, but I have to read out all their questions. And I think it's much better for you guys to ask questions directly and do it that way. But if you do have a question, put them through. I'm trying to think of what I'm working on. Oh yeah, we've got a video coming out on the World Test Championship at the moment, which I've been looking into a little bit, which is really, really interesting. I've been looking at the schedule, who may win, who may not win, and these sorts of things. So that will be coming out tomorrow, I believe. But Aditya has come through with a question. Hey, mate. Oh, got to press the button.
Yeah, hi. So I had a question regarding the 100 that is going to happen 2 weeks from now, I think, 2 to 3 weeks from now. So why are England actually playing a series in between of the 100? What's the logic behind that? They have I believe the test series is between the 100 itself.
Oh, okay. You're saying why is it interlapping with England cricket?
Yeah, because the way IPL works is like they do their IPL, and the IPL is a main event for them for the whole year, which is the revenue generator. So they do not interfere that with any other series per se. But
Yeah.
why do ECB have an obsession with playing so many matches at the same time?
Well, I think you fundamentally need to understand that there are less months to play cricket in England than there are in many other cricket cultures. So straight
Okay.
away, you're trying to fit a lot of cricket in. The other thing is that they are using international cricket at the moment to fund the 100, right? That
Okay.
wasn't quite the case with the IPL because I think they got enough money early on that they knew that wasn't going to be a problem. Whereas the 100 is by no means a guarantee. So they need the money from the international games. If you were to cancel a series with India, I'm not sure how they would even, especially after COVID, I'm not even sure how they would afford to run the 100 at this point and
Hmm.
on the level that they want to run it anyway. So that
Hmm.
is another problem there. I think also it's a little bit what Australia did. It's not quite backing the product. One of the great things with the IPL was that Lallet backed it and basically said this is going to make us a lot of money, so let's give ourselves a window for it. Whereas if you look at the Big
Hmm.
Bash and the 100, they're really looking at more being domestic leagues, right? They're not looking at them
Okay.
being big, big. I don't think, and I could be wrong with this, but I don't think I am. At no stage did they think that the Big Bash or the 100 was going to be the biggest T20 league in the world, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think specifically because of that, you have a situation where they're playing it a little bit safer than they probably need to play it. I know the Big Bash flirted with it. I don't know if you know my favorite Big Bash fact is that they made the Melbourne Stars green with a star on it because they thought Pakistani kids would be buying the shirts.
Oh.
Right? But I don't think we ever really got to the level in the Big Bash where they thought, oh, this is going to be the biggest league in the world. And I think that's the same with the 100. Fundamentally, the 100 is copying a little bit of the IPL, but it's really more copying the Big Bash. And in Australia, we have a city-based culture. They don't really have a city-based culture in what country am I talking about? England. In the same way,
Hmm.
they don't have as many big cities, so they're not even sure how it will go. Like, how will it go with northern-based teams, and how will it go with southern-based teams, and all of these sorts of
Okay.
things. And so, rather than giving it a window and not being able to fund it, I think they're trying to do both. My guess is if it goes absolutely ballistic, it will eventually have its own window, but that might be quite a way off.
Okay. Also, I just wanted to follow up. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, are these franchises owned by a party which is not actually the ECB, or the ECB is controlling the whole setup?
No, the ECB will be controlling the whole thing. Sorry,
Okay.
can I just get you to mute your mic? There's just a weird sound in the background. Sorry. That's all right. When you want to talk, just unmute it again. But there's just a weird sound effect coming through. But yeah, there's always been talk of that. The problem is the IPL works perfectly at the moment, but it probably won't work perfectly when one day the Mumbai owner's like, why would we let Jasprit Bumrah, or whoever their Jasprit Bumrah of that time is, why would we want him bowling all those overs for India? Why do we want him bowling in the test match when we're spending all this money on him? And there are obviously other concerns with private ownership that bring in. You can't control the teams. For instance, in the Big Bash at the moment, you could probably convince a team to bat a player in a certain position if you wanted them to for the national team. That's really hard with the IPL structure or the CPL structure. I think going forward, the ECB would still like to be in a position where they can make extra money from this by having bringing private ownership in makes it a proper league in a way that the Big Bash and the 100 are not currently designed to be. But it also brings a lot of problems if you're the governing body who also looks after the national team. And I think that there's certainly a sort of toss-up situation that you have there. And Indian cricket will definitely feel this. CPL, I think they've already had issues with this as well, where, especially what happens is you've got all the best young Indian prospects are probably going to be batting in the top 3 for their IPL teams. But that may not be the spot that India needs them to get good at. they need to really be good at number 5, 6, and 7. And you can only play, A cricket is great, but you really want to test them against the best bowlers in the world to see if they can bat 5, 6, and 7 for your national team. There are also, just other problems with, marketing and, general problems that concern Cricket Australia. That's why they pulled out. I still think in their heart of hearts, the ECB wants private ownership. But at the moment, I think we're a way away from that happening.
Thanks, Jarrod. That was a great answer. Thank you so much.
No problem. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming up here. So if I get one more question, I will certainly answer it. And if not, we can end that here. But yeah, just to talk about the video that's coming online tomorrow. I've had a bit of a look at the World Test Championship to see how it works and to see which teams are most favoured. And I mean, when I say see how it works, I know it doesn't work, but to see which teams are favoured, to see which teams have the toughest run. So it's a really, really interesting video if you like that. And we'll be doing more of those. So if you're not following me on Spotify Greenroom, we'll certainly be doing more of these as we work out the technology and how to get these chats up on YouTube. But thank you all for your questions. If you are an Android and you're headbutting the screen because it would come through to me, I am very sorry. Big shout out to Kelvin, who certainly made my day. But thanks for coming on this chat. And we'll be trying to, in the future, I'm trying to get one up a week and then using them as podcasts and up on the YouTube channel. But for now, we're just making sure all the technology works. Thanks for chatting, and I'll talk to you all again soon.